So Ohio State, Oregon coming up this weekend. And, what happens when we have these big-time matchups is you got to do the generic, which one needs the win more?
That's right.
It's very generic-y. It's lazy. And I'm a lazy guy, so that's
right.
what we're getting. I have no problem. It is what it is. I'm not trying to be super creative here. But look, the bottom line is I try to look at it from a perspective of urgency. Which team do you feel like has to have the most urgency with this matchup? Oregon is new to the Big Ten. They're the number 3 team in the country. Just like Texas in the SEC, who's making a splash right now as the number 1 team in the country. They're both trying to fight one another for who's going to have the most impressive transition to their new power conference, right? Like that's kind of what's happening here between Oregon and Texas. But the difference is Texas, the ironic part is their very first true real SEC test is actually Oklahoma. That's kind of wild to me. Their first real test in the SEC is Oklahoma, right? But with Oregon in the Big Ten, their first Big Ten test is the Big Ten test. It is the Buckeyes, and it's coming up Saturday night. 7:30 the kickoff, 6 o'clock pregame coverage begins right here on 1410 ESPN Radio for the radio listeners, of course. But Oregon, obviously, they have the home field advantage. That atmosphere is going to be fantastic. Obviously, it's going to be a big game of the year.
I think so.
Game of the year, right? Ohio
so.
State at Oregon. But my concern about all of this is it wasn't even a calendar year ago where we were doubting Ryan Day. We were doubting this program. They had lost to Michigan for the 3rd straight year. They lost to Missouri in the bowl game. And a lot of people were down on Ryan Day. I've never been the get rid of Ryan Day guy, but I started to build a little doubt. I felt the program was getting soft. I felt that the program was losing its confidence. I was losing my confidence as a Buckeye fan. And then all of a sudden, the NIL collective and just the Ohio State offseason and Ryan Day rallying the troops, kind of changed the perception of this program heading into the season. Ryan Day did a very good job, all things considered, with losing to Michigan 3 straight years, losing that bowl game to Missouri, the program seeming flat from a optimism standpoint. He did a good job of keeping those guys united, keeping those guys willing to want to come back and contend for a national championship and to finally get that win over Michigan, right? But there's a little doubt I still have in the back of my mind about how does Ryan Day fare in big games? Because Ohio State, they're supposed to win big games. They're supposed to be a national championship contender. But they regularly, during the Ryan Day era, despite a couple big wins here and there, they lose big games way more than they win. And that's not a hot take. That's not an opinion. That is a fact. This team loses a lot of big games. We'll share it up on the screen now. This is during the Ryan Day era in Columbus. Ryan Day has lost so many big games during his time at Ohio State as the head coach. We'll start in 2019. Right, you lose to Clemson in 2019. That was the flag. Remember they picked up the flag, and then obviously that's how the Ryan Day era started. But that was the Justin Fields year. That was a fantastic season that had a controversial finish. 29-23 the final. Fields throws that interception late in that game, but that was a fun Fields versus Trevor Lawrence matchup in that. Okay, we could forgive him for that. It was a close one. Urban Meyer lost close games during that stretch.
It was a fumble.
It was the fumble that they didn't. What was that? What was the controversy?
The catch on the sideline. Justin Ross, Jeff Okudah stripped it. They
called
it incomplete, and it was absolutely a fumble.
That was the one. And again, there was the officiating that dominated that conversation, no doubt.
Sean Wade targeting on Trevor Lawrence definitely wasn't. Oh, that was a terrible game.
Still sitting with you, huh?
Terrible
Still
game.
Sitting with you. Now, that's a loss I don't necessarily put on Ryan Day. That was one of the classic college football playoff matchups. Okay, cool. 2020, Alabama. You get to the national championship game. In fact, Ryan Day vindicated himself by beating Clemson a year later the semifinal to get to Alabama, so I don't want to forget mentioning that, right? That was that DJ Uiagalelei year. I got that one down. That was the last time he was good, right? I think because, they beat Notre Dame that year. Clemson did to get to the
But
playoff.
Trevor was back for the Ohio State game.
Yeah. So, he was. That is right. Okay,
Yeah.
see, I'm all over the
DJ
place.
played the one game when Trevor was out with COVID against Notre Dame, put up crazy numbers. Trevor was back for that playoff game, though.
And then Notre Dame still made the playoff that year, which
Right.
is wild.
Right.
But no, so Ohio State, they faced number 1 Alabama after finally knocking off Clemson in the semifinal before. And they don't just lose to Alabama. They get beat down by Alabama. But okay, you know what? It's COVID. We can overlook that. It was a very weird season. Getting to the title game, more power to you. But then that's where things started to get a little interesting. You lose to Clemson, you lose to Alabama, 19 Clemson, 20 Alabama. And then you got Oregon at home, non-conference portion of the schedule at this point. You lose to Oregon 35-28. Well, that's fine. You still have a chance to make the playoff. Just take care of business in the Big Ten and beat your rival. You'll be fine. And they don't just lose. They get beat down by number 5 Michigan that year. All right, 2022, it's a new year. You lose to Michigan 45-23, back-to-back years losing to your rival. But don't worry, you have a chance to redeem yourself in the semifinal of the college football playoffs. And they lose to Georgia 43-42 in what was an instant classic. I mean, my gosh, it came down to the kick at the very end. It was an unfortunate loss for Ohio State, but a loss nonetheless. You lost to Georgia. You lost to Michigan for the second straight year. You lost to Oregon in the non-conference earlier that year. You lost to Alabama in the national championship game. You lost to Clemson in the semifinal the year before. And then you get to last season. You lose to Michigan for the third straight year, right? You lose to Michigan for the third straight year. Then you get to take on top 10 Missouri in the bowl game. And that was an embarrassing loss, 14-3. A lot of stars out, completely get it. But that's just, I mean, a few of those big games that they have lost throughout the time that Ryan Day has led this Buckeye program. Now, there's some good wins in there. I talked about the Clemson win in the semifinal that set up that national championship loss against Alabama. For me, I'm going to be nitpicky here. I don't consider the Notre Dame games that big of wins. I'm not going to, for championship standards that Ohio State has, I'm not going to sit here and say, my gosh, I can't believe we beat a 3-loss Notre Dame team. I can't believe we beat a 4-loss Notre Dame team the year before with that loss to Marshall. Those are good wins. I appreciate the Kyle McCord road game, the come from behind one. Where's Lou Holtz right now? I appreciate that one a little just because the atmosphere. But overall, Ryan Day has a habit of losing way too many big games in Columbus as head coach. He's won 88% of his games. He's a fantastic head coach. But I do believe if you lose to Oregon on Saturday night, I think that doubt that started to creep in a lot of fans after the third loss to Michigan and the loss to Missouri in the bowl game, I think that doubt starts to come back. And I think that doubt's going to be very hard to ignore as we head into the bigger part of the schedule because you still have Nebraska and Penn State coming up. You still got Michigan as you're trying to end that 3-game losing streak. Then you got the college football playoff. And there's not just a semifinal final. Now you got to win up to 4 games to win this whole thing, maybe 3. So my concern in this whole situation, Oregon can lose this, they'll be fine. Most likely get back to the Big Ten championship. If Ohio State loses it, I think the doubt that started to creep in Buckeye fans' minds about Ryan Day and the state of the program after that Missouri loss, I think it comes back. And I think it's going to be more alarming because of, how many people we've touted the $20 million in NIL spend. We've talked about this roster. I mean, Judkins, you add him to Trevion Henderson. You bring Caleb Downs in. You bring in Will Howard. I think it's a very crucial loss if they lose on Saturday, in my opinion.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. This game means a ton for Ohio State. This is the first big test of the season where you are truly national championship or bust. And we can argue if they are every single year or not, but this year there's no debate about it. And the fact that you have a graphic right there with 8 big-time losses on it for Ryan Day, that shows you that it's a problem. But I think with this Ryan Day conversation, it's important to remember that with those 8 big-time losses, he is 61-8. Those are the only 8 games he has lost. He has dominated the conference. He has dominated every single team that he's supposed to dominate. And I know it doesn't matter unless you win championships and in Columbus unless you beat the rival. But Ryan Day's been a dominant head coach. He's been phenomenal. And if he goes to Eugene and loses to the third best team in America, I'm not going to feel any type of way about it. If he turns around and loses to him again in Indianapolis, then we have the conversation about, not being able to make adjustments and really not being the upper echelon head coach that we think he is. But I 100% agree that Ohio State needs this the most, and it's because of the outside noise. It's because of the distrust in Ryan Day and all that's built up over 3 straight years of losing the game to Michigan. But for me personally, either way this game goes, other than getting blown out or ran out of Autzen Stadium, regardless of how this game goes, my opinion on this Ohio State team, my opinion of Ryan Day will not change. I think Oregon's a very good team, and I think Oregon is getting overlooked, maybe not by the Buckeye players and coaches, but by a lot of Ohio State fans. I see a lot of people putting out there 3.5-point spread. This is going to be a walk in the park. We're going to boat race Oregon. Dylan Gabriel doesn't have it anymore. These receivers aren't very good. The O-line is poor. And while a lot of that stuff might be true and the film doesn't look as good as we thought it would, overlooking the third best team in the country going on the road to one of the best atmospheres in college football is certainly not the route I'm going to take. So I think this is as much of a toss-up game as you can get. I think this is right up there with Alabama, Georgia, right up there with what will be Georgia, Texas, with games of the year. I think these 2 teams are bona fide national championship contenders. I'm not going to be out on either with a loss. Ohio State definitely needs it more, but I think it's important to put in perspective how good Oregon is when we're talking about this game.
How many coaches are better than Ryan Day? Like that could come into Ohio State and be a better head coach, give you more confidence?
I think it would take time to rebuild with Nick Saban retiring and Urban out. Kirby's right there at the top of his game. Mac Brown is an interesting name.
Kirby's
because
number one by a country mile.
He's won a title. But, it's Kirby number one, but after that, rebuilding the top college football list. Because Dabo's in there with multiple national championships, but I don't know if I put him at the top of my list.
There's not a coach other than Kirby Smart I'd rather have than
Dabo doesn't believe in the NIL, so that would be.
He doesn't take transfers. How's that going to work?
Yeah, not a big fan of that.
Imagine being an NFL coach.
I loved DeBoer. I wouldn't take him right now.
I'm not a college football guy, but I get the expectations at Ohio State are obviously different. They have one of the highest paid rosters in college football. But at the same time, you quite literally couldn't have more success than Ryan Day. I know, I know you the losses to Michigan suck, and he has one national championship.
He has one national championship.
Ryan Day hasn't 0. So I guess that's the thing. The expectation is always national championship, and if you don't get it, your head's on the chopping block. But I for me, it's for somebody who doesn't watch a ton of college football, there's maybe two names. I'd take at Ohio State over Ryan Day.
And the thing is, with those two names, whatever those two names might be, you think you can get them? No. You're not calling Georgia and getting Kirby Smart to Columbus. The only chance of him ever leaving Georgia was last year, going back to the place he was the defensive coordinator at Alabama. And if he didn't do that, then he's never leaving Georgia. And I don't know why he would. So I think you're probably looking at an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator hire. And at this point with Ohio State's coaching staff, if you fire Ryan Day, I would assume it's Chip Kelly. Even though he's voiced his displeasure with coaching. Brian Hartline being thrown out in the chat, but there were rumors about when the UC job opened that he came down and didn't have a great interview for that spot, so I don't know if he's exactly cut out to be a head coach. I think Ryan Day is a great head coach, and I don't throw great around lightly with head coaches. I think Ryan Day is a great head coach. I think it takes something special to be 61-8 playing in the second best conference in college football, consistently playing top-level talent, making it to a national championship, consistently making it to the playoff, winning 3 Big Ten championships in a row. I think all that stuff is very, very, very hard to do. And I understand that he can't beat Michigan. And if he doesn't do it this year, he will be fired. But I think Ryan Day is a great coach, and I think the only game that his job is on the line for this year is the Michigan game.
Yeah.
And it's I get all of that. And by the way, just to be clear, I'm not anti-Ryan Day.
No, I know.
But I'm also – I don't think the people that are wrong until I hear you say, okay, you want Ryan Day gone. Who else are you going to get?
Right.
Because it's Chip Kelly – better than Ryan Day. It's a name. It's a recognizable name that's been around longer, so you're going to feel more safe and warm inside. And maybe Chip Kelly, with the resources that Ohio State has, does maximize those more. The problem is, I know you say, hey, with the 8 losses that he's had in his entire career, the only team he can't seem to beat is Michigan. But it's of all the losses, I don't know if that helps him or hurts him, because you bring up a good point. Hey, look at those losses. Yeah, it's the Georgias and Alabamas of the world. That's who he's losing to. But it's but that's the problem. Every time you run into those teams, you're losing. You're losing a lot of big games. He loses a ton of big games. He has way more big game losses than big game wins, but the winning percentage is astounding. The fact that, again, single-digit losses, this is year 7 for him or year 6 for him? What year is this for him?
He took over in 19,
so 5.
right?
So he's in, yeah. But either way, he's been around for quite some time. They do need to get that championship. But to be fair to him, this idea that he has to win every year, we love that as Buckeye fans. I know not everyone in the chat's Buckeye fans, but they average a championship a decade. They average a national championship a decade. They had one in the 2010s with Tressel. They had one in the 2000s with Tressel, one in the 2010s with Urban, and here we are. It's been 10 years since the last one. This is your number 10. Maybe this is the year this is your one for the decade.
I'm in. I'll take it. I'll take it this year. I think Ohio State's trending in the right direction. I think another thing that you have to look at, especially in current era college football, when talking about Ryan Day, is whether we like it or not, it's a lot more than winning and losing at this point in college football. And Ryan Day has been able to dominate recruiting and dominate the transfer portal and continue to get top-end talent at Ohio State at literally every position. So I think that means a lot, too. I think firing a guy because he loses big games is certainly one thing. And if Ryan Day wasn't maybe, arguably, now with Saban gone, the best recruiter in America, I would certainly lean more that way. But I think that plays a massive role. And I hate to say more than winning and losing, but we talk about in baseball, would you rather just get to the playoffs and roll the dice every year, or would you rather guarantee a championship? And obviously you can't guarantee a championship. But if Ryan Day is consistently putting out one of the most talented rosters in college football, I have to think in a 12-team playoff we're going to get lucky at some point. So I'm going to take the recruiter.
This is the arrogance as a Buckeye fan, but how much of that is Ryan Day and how much of that is just the brand of Ohio State?
Every coach at every university in the country gets credit for recruiting, regardless of brand, except for Ryan Day.
Yeah, we talked about this in the past. They get all these top receivers, and Brian Hartline gets all the credit.
I think Hartline's a phenomenal recruiter, but Ryan Day is in those rooms, and Ryan Day is 61-8, and Ryan Day makes a difference.
Yep. So, nonetheless. But Ohio State, Oregon, can't wait.
Cannot wait.
I see why people are
So glad it's a night game, too.
Yep.
Shout out Big Ten for not squeezing this sucker in big noon kickoff like they do with every other good game. Night game in Autzen. This is going to rock. This weekend is for guys like me who sit here all year and say college football is the best sport ever and you should watch regardless of the numbers next to the teams. This is the weekend that it's like just sit down on Saturday, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, grab a seat on the couch, sit there for 12 hours because at 11 o'clock at night, we have Boise State and the Heisman favorite on the island against Hawaii. 12 hours of elite football on Saturday. Lock
Is there a
in.
London game on
It's going to
Sunday
be a
too?
great one. London game on Sunday. Bengals at Sunday Night Football. This is going to be an incredible football weekend. Ranked game tonight. Utah plays tonight. Just a phenomenal weekend for football.